Good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Finance Committee. I would invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We welcome everyone that is here this afternoon, and at this point we will open the public hearing on Senate Bill 371, recognizing the sponsor, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Cindy Rosenwald from Senate District 13 in Nashua, and I'm pleased to introduce Senate Bill 371. This bill appropriates $3 million of general funds to replenish the lead paint hazards remediation fund managed by the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. This fund was established 3 years ago to offer zero-interest loans to help property owners make housing safe for children by remediating the hazard caused by lead paint. In addition, child care centers are also able to access this loan money to remove lead hazards from drinking water. As you know, children exposed to lead dust from old paint can suffer permanent brain damage. There is no safe level of lead at all. And New Hampshire's done, I think, a good job of making our aging housing stock safer for young children. In your binders, you have this beautiful color handout from the Department of Health and Human Services that talks about the lead program and the scope of the problem in New Hampshire. If you turn to the second page, it kind of shows that children are screened and turning up with elevated blood lead levels in really all areas of the state. It's not just the cities, it's also some rural areas. And down on the bottom right, the number of children that are really most at risk and are being carefully followed now has reached 85. These numbers are probably depressed because fewer children got tested, have been tested during the pandemic. But the problem is real, as this caseload of children with elevated blood lead levels has increased. And the fund has been very appealing to homeowners and landlords. About 300 units have been remediated in the 3 years since this was established. And the fund has basically been almost fully drawn down. And the problem hasn't gone away. I did have a conversation with some of the lead experts in Washington at HUD to ask if the lead in drinking water funds that were part of the recently signed Infrastructure Investment Act could be used instead of general funds. But it turns out that money is only to replace water service lines coming into buildings and can't be used for individual housing units. So I explored that area, but it didn't pan out. So I hope the committee will agree that we have more work to do to make our housing safe for young children. The costs when a child is poisoned by lead are very expensive. Their educational costs, their health costs, their future productivity costs, and we, I think, can afford to replenish the fund. There are some experts here, and we've received testimony from the Conservation Law Foundation. I think that's in your books as well. But I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Galeri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions.
Yep.
Do you know if the lead remediation fund that we have addresses the feed lines into the buildings or just within the structures themselves?
I believe it is just within the structures themselves, possibly the outside if a window frame is contaminated, but it's not the service lines.
Okay, follow up? Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question arises in my mind, if we're going to appropriate 3 million, do we want to make it non-lapsing? It's right, as I read it right now,
Okay.
for the sum of 3 million for the ending June 30th of 23, if there's excess funding left in that, obviously, would probably, I'm guessing, I don't know the fund's actual stipulations, would go back to the general fund, or would we want to consider making it non-lapsing if it's not all been expended?
Well, the fund itself doesn't lapse.
Okay,
So we appropriate the money once they make these zero interest loans that get repaid into the fund over time.
okay, thank
I
you.
think, but Ben Frost is here.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ryan Hale, speaking in favor. Okay, my mistake, yes. Ryan Hale has signed in favor but not speaking. Bob Quinn for New Hampshire Association of Realtors has also signed in favor but not speaking. So I guess the only expert left is Ben Frost, New Hampshire Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Ben Frost from New Hampshire Housing. I'll try to be an expert. Here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 371, and just some details about what we have done at New Hampshire Housing with the $3 million that the legislature appropriated to this fund when it created it a few years back. And we have, at this point, obligated all but 71,000 and change of those funds to projects. Most of those projects have been completed. Excuse me. We do this as loans to the property owners. And these loans are secured by a lien on the property, and the loan stays with that property until the property is sold. There's no interest on the loans, but the money eventually will come back, and we have seen 3 loans repaid to a total of about $80,000. So far, and with the original $3 million that the legislature appropriated, we have done work in about 230 plus units. Most of those are rental units, although we do also make loans to owner-occupied single-family homes. For the rental projects, we have a expenditure cap of $11,000, and the owner has to put in 10% match. For owner-occupied units, the cap is $100,000. These are, as you might imagine, substantially larger projects on a unit basis, although with multifamily projects, multifamily rental projects, you might have many different units within a building, so that does add up there. The funds have been used all over the state, in every county and a lot of different municipalities. As you might imagine, where the housing stock is older, where you have more people living in more housing units, that's where you find a greater concentration of these projects occurring. I think we would welcome the addition of additional funds to this. At this point, we're just waiting for money to come back from loans, and that only happens when the properties sell. So to keep this program active and to leverage the federal funds that we get from HUD, we regularly compete for HUD funding in a similar program, but we're able to leverage the federal funds with these state funds on a roughly one-to-one basis. Most of the projects that we work on have both state and federal funds in them, although there are a couple of projects that were just state funded. Most of the projects are, the rental projects that we finance through this program are for smaller property owners, so mom and pop rental operations, if you will, as opposed to the really big operations like Red Oak or Elm Grove, although we have done a couple of projects with Elm Grove. But most of these are, smaller landlords who many times don't have the capacity, the financial wherewithal to undertake these projects. But in order to keep these units on the market, they have to do the remediation work that's associated with the lead contamination in their rental units. That's all I have to say. I'd appreciate the opportunity to keep this program running and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and nice to see you, Mr. Frost. How much money must be spent for the lines that lead into the home, the lead lines that are still around? I mean, those are very expensive to attack. Those are large pipes. We're probably it's half inch, maybe to 3/4 inside a home, but leading to the home, and that's my major concern. You can abate the stuff in the house, but if you don't abate the lead lines, then that's a fool's journey.
Senator, thank you for that question. I don't have a good answer for you. I can certainly find that out for you. What I would say is that, and I think Senator Rosenwald is correct, that it would only, the work is only on the aspects of the property that are property owner controlled. So if it is a municipal line and municipally controlled, this would not deal with that. The other thing I'd point out is that with water supply, you can filter, and you can effectively filter the lead. There's no other way of dealing with the lead paint other than addressing it, encapsulating it, sealing it, and keeping it from getting into kids' blood. That is really the critical thing to do. We can filter the water.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Morse?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, we're talking two different accounts though, when you're talking water and lead paint. We have a account that had for lead in water.
Yes, so this is for principally for lead paint remediation.
Yeah.
I would say that there is within the fund the ability to remediate water supply and other lead hazards in licensed childcare facilities, but there has been to date no interest among the owners of childcare facilities in this program. And we've talked with HHS about this, and they've said that's because these properties are already in good condition. To get the license, they have to be in good condition, so they don't really need that remediation work.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Reagan.
So I'm curious, historically, when did we stop using lead pipe and lead paint?
Senator, I can't speak about lead pipe, but lead paint was stopped in 1978. So we have a lot of structures in New Hampshire that were pre-1978 and have a substantial likelihood of having lead paint in them.
Further questions? I have a few. Am I correct in understanding that any money used from this fund is taken in loans, not grants?
That is correct, sir. The state funds that we administer, we put out as loans to the property owners, whether they're the owners of single-family owner-occupied homes or owners of rental properties. These are done as loans secured by a lien on the property, and the loan and the lien stay with the property until the property is sold.
Okay. And am I correct in understanding that when a case of lead poisoning comes in, that HHS does investigation on that to find out the source?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that is true. I would encourage you to inquire of HHS. I'm not an expert in how HHS deals with those things. I will say that where a property is under order from the department, those assume a high priority in funding through this program from us.
Okay. Senator Rosenwald led me to believe that you are an expert in all things.
I'm good at some things, probably an expert, not too many things.
Do you know that if a landlord ends up, or if somebody ends up with lead poisoning and it is found that that there is lead in the home, do you know if it is assumed that the lead came from the home as opposed to, say, a child's toy that came from China that had lead paint on it, or playground equipment?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, sir. I do know that if there is a lead hazard in the home in the form of lead paint, then it should be addressed to help keep kids safe.
Okay, and if lead is found in the home, do you know if the families within that unit are required to move out
I don't believe-
until remediation takes place?
I don't believe that is the case. I think the remediation can occur with people present, people living in the unit. It's a matter of a contractor coming in and encapsulating the lead paint
Okay,
in
thank you.
place.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Can you tell me at one point, either in a point of time or a dollar value, will this fund be self-funding?
Oh, Senator, that's a great question. And I wish I had a good answer for you, but just to give you an indicator, we did get the $3 million from the legislature in this fund a few years back. We've done these number of projects. In that time, we've had, as I said, 3 property sales, so the money came back to the fund, a total of $80,000, which doesn't go a long way. So it would take probably a long time for this to be self-funded, even with regular appropriations by the legislature.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask anyone standing to please take a seat. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on Senate Bill 371? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 371. And we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 272. I can. Okay, thank you. And Chair will recognize the sponsor of the bill, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Cindy Rosenwald from Senate District 13, Nashua. And I bring before you today Senate Bill 272. This will set up a study committee to look at the public deposit investment pool, which is affectionately known as PDIP. PDIP was established in 1992 in RSA 38322. Its purpose is to jointly hold and manage the cash from public jurisdictions, risk pools, and boards. So it's not really the state's cash reserves, but it's other pots of money. It's managed by an independent financial advisor, and there's kind of an advisory board. Since the creation of this fund 30 years ago, it has grown, and its assets now, I believe, are somewhere around $240 million. But it hasn't ever really been looked at structurally since it was created 30 years ago. And it's so large now that I think it's worth taking a study committee look at oversight and regulation. Questions like, does the banking commissioner's regulatory role need any tweaks? Are the investments maximizing return along with both liquidity and safety? The investments of this $240 million are out of state, possibly out of the country as well. So I'm also interested in looking at whether rate of return is properly the only objective, or should we also look at what I think of as multipliers? So, for example, if a portion of these funds were invested, let's say, in institutions that had a physical presence in New Hampshire, would increased access to capital result in new businesses being funded that hire employees and then pay BET and BPT taxes? Would the new businesses also pay property taxes that could benefit our cities and towns and property taxpayers? Would the new employees go out to restaurants and generate meals and rooms tax? So I think there are other economic impacts of investment that are worth a discussion. In addition to what's the rate of return, how safe are these investments, and how liquid. So I think a study committee is warranted and appropriate. Pleased to try and answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Senator Reagan.
So I'm a trustee of trust funds in my hometown. And my understanding of fiduciary responsibility is that the objective is to get the greatest return possible, not do good deeds. So I'm kind of question that being specified in here, that you're looking to do good deeds with other people's money.
I think of it actually as getting the best return, just looking at that more broadly. I don't view it as doing good deeds, but generating the most safe, well, I think everybody has to look for a safe return. I'm looking at it as generating the most return, but on increased parameters.
Further questions? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does the PDIP at this time report to the governor and council, the legislature, the treasurer? Do they have an annual reporting mechanism of any sort?
There is an annual report. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but I believe there's an annual report.
Follow up?
So my question is, would, instead of a study committee, would not a letter sent to the head of the PDIP asking these questions generate both a return and information to support it without having to form a study committee?
Well, I don't think that is one thing we could do, but it wouldn't give us the opportunity to see what other opportunities are out there for investment. What if 1% of the fund were invested in New Hampshire institutions? What might the result be? And I don't think we would be able to get that from the annual report.
Follow up?
I would feel differently. I think if the question is asked, that we would get an answer. What percentage of your assets, both in terms of percentage and actual dollar value, are invested in New Hampshire businesses, assets, or whatever? I understand, the intent of this bill. I'm not sure we need one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. further questions? I would just have one. You've mentioned 3 items in here as far as things that the committee shall study. Might there be questions beyond those that are posed to PDIP?
Yes, I think there certainly could be. Those are the ones that I thought of, and also questions that were raised from other stakeholders.
Okay. Would there be any obligation to the study committee or PDIP to answer anything beyond what we are asking in lines 14 through 20?
Well, we could certainly amend it to say any other subjects of the committee's interest. There's not that much time for the study committee, so I think we'd have to be careful how broad we made it, or we'd have to extend the report date. Either could be good options.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair will recognize Ryan Hale from New Hampshire Bankers, speaking in favor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And I do have written testimony. Good afternoon, Chairman Daniels, honorable members of the Senate Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Ryan Hale. I'm Vice President of Government Relations for the New Hampshire Bankers Association. The New Hampshire Bankers Association represents 38 member banks here in New Hampshire, which employ nearly 6,000 employees. I come before the committee today to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 272, establishing a study committee to study the oversight and operation of the public deposit investment pool. Before I get into my testimony, I'd first like to thank Senator Rosenwald for taking an interest in this issue and filing this piece of legislation. As Senator Rosenwald indicated, Senate Bill 272 sets up a study committee to look at the banking department's role in the operation of the PDIP, as well as the impact of the fund on the New Hampshire economy, the general performance, safety, diversification, rate of return, and liquidity of the pool. For those that are unfamiliar with the pool, it was set up in the early 90s. It falls under the purview of the banking department along with an advisory board, which consists of the banking commissioner, state treasurer, municipal, and bank representatives. They are tasked with setting pool policy, overseeing activity of the fund administrator, and keeping an eye on the overall performance of the pool. This pool gives state municipalities and other public entities alternative to investing their funds collectively. This came out during, as mentioned, early 90s, where fears about banking followed several bank closures here in the state. Regulatory changes have since followed, and much has happened since that time. Today's banks are in strong position, well capitalized, and highly liquid. Regulators have even noted that banks are very well positioned heading into the pandemic and continue to do very well. Additionally, there is significant regulatory oversight to help ensure banks do not go back to the place they were in the 90s when this fund was created. Over the past couple of years, former banking commissioner Jerry Little expressed concerns over the conflict of interest he saw in the department overseeing the PDIP. As bank commissioner, he was responsible for supervision of New Hampshire chartered banks and for overseeing the safety and soundness of those institutions. However, he wore at the same time another hat, and that was overseeing the operation of the PDIP, which he felt was in direct competition to New Hampshire banks. He would periodically refer to the fact that none of the money in the pool's portfolio is in New Hampshire institutions, and pointing out this money is actually leaving the state altogether. During the most recent PDIP meeting, the report showed that this fund was around $200 million. So now we feel is a good time to stop and take a look at this pool. In closing, for the reasons I've listed above, I would urge the committee to support 272 and vote on to pass. I'm happy to take any questions members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said the pool has about 200 million as a corpus as we speak. What's been the rate of return on the pool?
It's been a little bit since I checked, but I believe the last time I looked, it was around 0.2%, 2 basis points.
2 basis points?
Yep.
That's de minimis.
Yep.
Is it not?
I'm sorry,
That's de minimis in terms of rate of return.
I believe so.
Further question?
Further question?
Has anyone brought that to the attention of the banking commissioner, that the rate of return is so small?
So former Commissioner Little oversees this board and is part of those discussions.
Further question?
Was it?
And what has been done internally with the board to rectify that situation?
That's a great question that I don't have the answer to. I know our current commissioner, Emilia Galeri, is here and may have the answer to that question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So over what period of time is this 0.2% that you refer to been the rate of return? Is that 1 year, 20 years?
That's a great question. I don't have the exact answer to that. I'd have to go back and look to see how long that 0.2% has been the rate of return.
I would note, Mr. Chair, that we had a dismal performance by the retirement fund for a 1 year period, but that their rate of return actually substantially higher than that 1 year showed. So I think a more accurate metric would be helpful to the committee. Follow up?
Follow up.
So I would sense from the support of the Bankers Association that you would look to have these funds invested in private banks as opposed to an estate entity. Is that correct?
Yeah, we feel it is direct competition to our banks, not just state chartered banks, but all of our bank members.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have Susan Alimi, representative, who's checked in favor but not speaking, and Emilia Galeri, speaking with no position from the New Hampshire Banking Department.
I have a handout.
Good afternoon. My name is Emilia Galeri, and as of Friday, I am the bank commissioner for the state of New Hampshire, representing the New Hampshire Banking Department. As stated, we have no position on the bill. I'm here to provide any information that the committee may need that would be helpful. Just listening to some of the testimony that's already occurred, I would draw your attention. I have a handout that I supplied. The last bullet point on the handout includes a link to the annual report for the PDIP. So anyone is welcome to go and review that there. It discusses the investment types. I would also point out that the pool is currently managed by an investment advisor, PFM. So we have access to lots of information about the pool that we'd be happy to provide to you. Just let me know what you may need. Additionally, the handout also discusses how last legislative session, in response to Commissioner Little's concerns about the conflict, the funding, basically how the department is funded vis-a-vis the PDIP pool, its management of the PDIP pool was changed to enable the department to bill the PDIP for time our staff spends working on the pool. Because as you may be aware, the banking department is self-funded, so we're funded by the entities that we regulate, including state chartered banks. So prior to the passage of that legislation, our staff's time spent working on the pool was essentially being paid by chartered and licensed entities regulated by the department, but that's been remedied by HB 610 from the last legislative cycle. I think that's all I have to say. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer it, and to the extent I don't know something, I will go and find it out for you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator Gaida.
Just real quick, prior to my prior question, are you able to state a rate of return
off the top of my
We'll-
head
we'll
now.
look
I'm
that up
sorry.
then, okay.
I started in this role on Friday, and I was deputy before then, but I wasn't assigned to the PDIP pool, so I don't have that hot off the top of my head.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I have no more speakers signed up. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Representative Alimi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Susan Alimi, City of Lebanon, Ways and Means in the House. I was on finance a long time ago when, and I was there when Finance and Ways and Means in 2007 was told by the LBA the results from a committee report about the New Hampshire retirement system that we owed $300 million that we didn't know we owed, that had been building since 1992 when that formula was redesigned because of the major financial crisis. I do think 30 years is too long to go without taking a look at how this one is operating from the legislative side, just to make sure that that 0.2%, for instance, was a freak of the current snap recession we've had. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Representative Almi? Seeing none? Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Beth Galperin, Galperin. I am the marketing rep for the New Hampshire Public Deposit Investment Pool. And I'm not prepared to give any presentation today, and nor were you asking for it in a short time. But I do want you to know that I'm happy to take back any questions to the program's administrator and investment advisor, and that's PFM Asset Management.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Any questions from the committee? I think the thing that, the question that has been outstanding is when we talk about a 0.2% return.
It's 0.02 at the time.
0.02.
We're looking forward to federal.
Over what period of time?
The last year and a half, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, is there anyone else who wishes to testify on Senate Bill 272? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 272.
Mr. Chair,
Is that
Senator Bradley's in the hall.
Senator what?
Senator Bradley's in the hall.
Okay. Take your time. Okay. We will open the hearing on Senate Bill 274 and recognize the sponsor, Senator Bradley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Pleased to be here and sponsoring Senate Bill 274. There was a similar bill introduced last year. I think Senator Avard was the sponsor of. One of the main differences between this bill and that bill is this bill only applies to state government contracts. And what the bill does, what Senate Bill 274 does, it says that in a state-based contract, it cannot mandate a PLA, project labor agreement. A PLA is an agreement to use pre-hire collective bargain, and the PLA sets the wage and benefits levels, it sets works rules, it sets all labor disputes, and resolution of labor disputes. The reason for a bill like this is 90%, I'm told, of the workforce in New Hampshire is non-union, and so they're excluded from these kind of construction projects. And so the state has no ability to have the best kind of competitive bidding service for lower taxpayer costs, better opportunities to just see what's out there if there is a PLA mandate. Now, what the bill also says, state government can't mandate it. It only applies to the state. So municipalities, schools, counties are not, by virtue of the definition, included. But if you look on page 2, line 9, a PLA can be used voluntarily if that is what is in the interest of the contractors. So what did I say, page 2, line 9? It makes it very clear that it doesn't prohibit a state government entity that wants to enter into a PLA from doing so. There's an exception from this requirement that is in the last section of the bill on page 2, line 27. So again, and I'll just briefly summarize because I know that there are other speakers that want to speak. This is meant to be pro-competition. That's the bottom line, to be able to better access the full range of contractors that would offer the kind of construction services without the heavy hand of government choosing to only deal with a project labor agreement. I think it's unfair to the vast majority of people that work for non-union shops, and at the end of the day, there'll be less bidders and probably drive up the cost. So with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, thank you for bringing this bill forward and for your testimony. Would this impact local communities in the sense that, for example, highway projects that are state funded but locally carried out would be subject to this legislation?
My understanding is it applies to state contracts. So if it was being a state contract, that's a state project. If it's a local contract, it's a local contract. And that was a factor last year in that bill not going forward, was that it was broader and it covered municipalities.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Joshua Reep, Associated Building Contractors, speaking in favor of the bill.
Thank you. And I have printed copies. You're welcome. Thank you, Chairman Daniels. And Senators, thank you for hosting this discussion today on this important piece of legislation. My name is Joshua Reep. I'm the president of Associated Builders and Contractors, a trade association representing about 265 companies that employ thousands of people here in the Granite State. Our members build the schools, the office buildings, the churches and community centers that help make up the communities across this state. We simply ask that you support SB 274 today. Legislation would protect fair and open competition on state construction projects for all contractors, regardless of their affiliations. The bill accomplishes that by leaving the negotiation of work rules to be done privately between contractor and its labor force, and out of the hands of a government bureaucrat that doesn't understand or work day to day with construction projects. Let me explain to you why this is very important. When government mandates a project labor agreement, it costs taxpayers upwards of 20% or more for construction, in part because that invalidates the cost efficiencies that come out of privately done negotiations between workforce and the contractor, be it union or open shop. To a merit shop contractor, a PLA is akin to telling Bill Belichick he suddenly can't use his New England Patriot players for a Super Bowl. Instead, he must use all the players from the New York Giants and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Just doesn't make sense. They don't know their plays. They don't understand their commitments. Regardless of the talent, it's difficult to win when players are unfamiliar with the team's playbook. And in construction, it's very much like a team sport. It's unfair to place a team at a significant disadvantage when taking away their talent and key competitive advantages and understanding of commitment to culture, to safety, to construction processes and everything that a firm may have. So ultimately, that's why when a PLA is mandated by the government, it introduces certain efficiencies because the contractors are moved from the negotiating table on how to achieve those cost savings. In my 12 years working with the ABC and fighting for a fair and level playing field for contractors of all sizes, I've seen the negative impacts of anti-competitive and costly PLAs very much firsthand in many places. And I can tell you I've also witnessed a handful of ABC members who try to work on a PLA job, and it generally doesn't go very well. The reasons make perfect sense when you consider that the biggest asset a contractor brings to the table is its trained, well-trained, drug-free and alcohol-free and productive workforce. Asking a company to perform with unfamiliar labor force is impractical, and it makes it difficult to estimate labor costs and provide accurate competitive prices to customers. And again, that's why we oppose PLAs and encourage you to support this bill today. Additionally, when a government entity does mandate a PLA, it does actually interfere with existing CBAs that happen between a union contractor and a union force. Because when you have a government that comes in and says, here's what the labor standards are going to be, even a union contractors go, well, gosh darn it, I have to renegotiate everything because my labor agreement is no longer valid. I have to use this one that was negotiated by a government entity and labor unions that may not even be part of the local here, that may be of a different jurisdiction. Furthermore, we need SB 274 because we face a threat from a lot of the beltway politics that we see coming out. Already we've seen some of the federal stimulus money coming with some of the infrastructure stuff has included suggested use of project labor agreements. Now, I say suggested, you may think, well, that's just a suggestion. No one says you have to take it. But when you're looking at grants and grant writers who are unfamiliar with what a PLA really is, they think and they assume that that means you have to do a PLA to get the grant. That's not always the case. By being proactive with SB 274, we're coming in and we're saying, don't mandate PLAs. And that helps us to maximize every dollar that will be coming from the federal government. And by the way, this bill does nothing to affect Davis-Bacon. I know sometimes that comes up. PLA means wages. It doesn't. They're different things. PLA may include some negotiated labor rates, but oftentimes it's more work rule related, and that's where the inefficiencies can come in. And by the way, I've seen PLAs many times, and I'm sure some people speaking after me probably dispute this, but I can show you some PLAs that I've actually negotiated where it's decreased wage rates for the workers in some ways. So PLA doesn't do anything that you can't do privately negotiate anyway. So at the end of the day, we ask that you pass SB 274 to protect the competitive advantages that we currently enjoy today. And again, New Hampshire's workforce tends to be about 90% open shop. Some people put that at a higher number, but I think 90 is probably about accurate. And these people are building your schools, they're building your civic centers, they're building office buildings safely and competitively already here in New Hampshire. So this bill is about protecting that. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Before I entertain any questions, I will state that by our rules, we are not allowed to have anyone standing in the room, so if you are standing, please find a seat. I won't mention any names. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Rodney Bartlett from Methuen Construction, speaking in favor of the bill.
Thank you, Chair Daniels, the senators. My name is Rodney Bartlett. I'm the Business Relations Manager for Methuen Construction. We're headquartered out of Plastow, New Hampshire. If you're not familiar with our company, we employ between 200 and 300 employees directly annually. We take on some of the larger mechanically driven projects in the state. As an example, Manchester Waterworks, new expansion in Hooksett for their treatment plant and the interconnection into their radial well system is one of our projects. We're also working at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard with it's not easy to get the name of the projects in the shipyard. I believe it's the unfueling depot for the nuclear submarines. We also have a project in Merrimack at their wastewater treatment plant. We've been there for a year and have a project that will hopefully wrap up shortly. To put a couple things in perspective that Josh alluded to, when you look at how projects are managed on site, when the projects involve a number of union agencies, it can get a little less efficient. And I'm going to use an example of a concrete retaining wall. The first part of the project is put the formwork in place. So the carpenters come in and put the formwork there. The next is the reinforcing steel. So the ironworkers come in and put in the reinforcing steel. Then comes the concrete laborers to place the concrete in the wall. And eventually the carpenters come back to take the forms off, and we start that all over again. The way it's managed within Methuen Construction, our laborers and workers are multi-trade, so you have the same crew put the formwork up, tie the rebar, and place the concrete. Much more efficient. And I think that's where a lot of potential savings in support of this bill comes from, and that's estimated about roughly 20% on a project cost. As a little additional background, I've been with Methuen for a little over a year at this point. Prior to that, I worked in the municipal sector and managed projects from, I know this is a long time ago, since 1979 to 2020. Capital projects, water treatment plants, wastewater plants. And the last thing that a municipal manager needs is one more layer of bureaucracy on top of all the layers that are there today. So keeping it as simple as we can to manage these projects, both from the municipal state position and giving you efficiency on the job site, I think is critical. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Gary Abbott, Associated General Contractors, speaking in favor of the bill.
Thank you very much, Chairman Daniel, Senators. For the record, my name is Gary Abbott. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Associated General Contractors of New Hampshire. I will make my testimony very short. We support this legislation. Our association, who represents contractors, both building and highway, we're committed to a free and open competition in public construction markets. And so anything that would be based on qualifications of an individual's company practice, we would oppose, because we would like to see as many companies as possible that could compete for projects. So we support that. The paper's pretty short. I did attach a kind of history and factors of what a PLA is, and over the years, it's been around for a while. We do not use them currently in New Hampshire. So this is just making sure that we continue with this. So with that, I would end my testimony and say that if the committee ends up putting a subcommittee or wants to discuss this, our association is very open to meeting with the senators and having the discussion. But I do think this legislation limits it to government contracts through a government agency. And thank you very much for the opportunity today, and hope you would support this bill.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? I do have one. Did I just hear you say that PLAs are not used in New Hampshire?
No, not completely. The state of New Hampshire, through an agency, has not used the PLA. But we have seen PLAs in local projects. They were proposed, they didn't actually use them. Associations recommend to the community that they don't do it. And we did see it on a federal project in Manchester that came through and ended up removing that PLA. So when I say they're around, it's not an unusual thing, but I think we've always had the great policy in New Hampshire. This would just put it in place so everybody knows that you want fair and open competition.
Thank you for that clarification. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Joe Casey from the IBEWs, speaking in opposition to the bill. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joe Casey. I am currently the business development representative for the IBEW for the New England states. I'm a resident of Rochester, New Hampshire, and been involved with the construction industry for almost, in June, it'll be 39 years. I worked 19 as a worker, as an electrician for contractors throughout the state of New Hampshire prior to going to work for the IBEW full-time as a representative, an advocate to try to find work for our members. So as a worker, I can tell you, in working in the state of New Hampshire, which I don't know if any of our previous speakers actually have done, but every job is critical. Every job is temporary when you work construction. All kinds of factors when you're trying to raise a family and work in the construction industry in New Hampshire. Depending on where you're working, it could be higher wages, less wages, all kinds of conditions that could have been put on the project. In the IBEW, in order to compete in New Hampshire, when I was working, we had to take significant pay cuts and concessions in order to stay competitive here in the state. And I can tell you that no one's mentioned that, you know, the number one issue with the construction industry that we're facing today is the lack of workers, the lack of qualified workers, the lack of skilled workers, the lack of young workers who are interested to come into the building and construction trades. This has been going on for a dozen years now. This morning, Employment Security in New Hampshire has over 700 job listings for skilled workers in construction that our contractors are looking for throughout the state. My contractors are in the same situation. We can't find enough workers, and it's been difficult. We don't have any issues, you know, when it comes to recruiting new apprentices to come through our apprenticeship program. I think when the workers look at and compare the apprenticeship programs, they find that ours is worth it, and they come in with us. We don't have a problem attracting. We do have a problem retaining workers. And, you know, there's been a lot said about the causes and what, you know, why, you know, after the recession, workforce did not want to come back to work in the state of New Hampshire. We had 2006, again, the New Hampshire Employment Security. We had over 30,000 workers working construction in New Hampshire. And today we have less than 30,000 working in New Hampshire, and we can't fill those calls. We never had that problem prior to the recession. The recession, the construction industry, 2007, 2008, went from 30,000 to 21,000 virtually overnight. There was 9,000 workers that were laid off, and that's what happens in recessions in construction. Jobs are canceled, jobs are postponed, nobody's investing. The construction worker or the construction projects are the first to go. We know that. That's part of the industry. A lot of the policies that the state of New Hampshire has right now do not work in favor of an unemployed construction worker, right? So we have our unemployment for a number of years before the COVID was, and still is, like $438 a week unemployment. When we had the big layoffs and our unemployment fund struggled, the governor and the legislature decided to increase business taxes and add a skip week for the worker. That skip week for the worker, if you're working construction and you get laid off, what you do is you try to find another job as soon as possible because you can't live off of $438 a week. And that's what we did, and that's what I did. I collected 2 times for 2 weeks for unemployment, both times that I was laid off. And if you have a skip week in there, that's added on the other end, the 26 weeks. No workers that are worth their while are going to be around for 26 weeks. But that one paycheck was huge. That skip week, once the fund became healthy again, that skip week was not included. When they brought the business unemployment taxes back down to where they were. Bill was passed, it was vetoed. Skip week is still in session as far as, it's still intact as far as I know. If you're a construction worker, you look at that. You look at the unemployment. Now, one thing that we're up against when we're trying to recruit and we're trying to get workers is the fact that the Massachusetts construction industry has doubled since 2010, since the time of our recession. Once we all started to recover, the Massachusetts construction industry went from $9 billion annually to $22 billion that it stands at today. And it's going to increase until 2030. That's who we're competing with. That's where our workers are. And I've told my friends from the merit shops this numerous times. It's not because kids don't want to get in or the parents aren't bringing them to the trades or whatever it is. They found it's better to work down there for a number of reasons. Unemployment, their workers' comp laws, everything that's involved. And we have a situation in New Hampshire. And if we're going to add to our list of have-nots here in New Hampshire, you cannot have a project labor agreement if an entity or the state of New Hampshire wanted to enter into a project labor agreement, which is simply an agreement that includes the labor force, right? Contractor has an agreement, the owner's standing there with an agreement, everybody has agreements. The only ones that don't are the labor force. The labor force, their wages and benefits and everything else can change like they did when they took the project labor agreement away on the Job Corps Center. First order of business, these workers were making what the prevailing wage was under building. First order of business was the contractor had that reduced so that the classification was under heavy, which reduced everybody's wages on the project. Can you imagine working on a project for 3 months as an operator, a laborer, a carpenter, and you're making already a low wage, and then somebody comes in and says, oh, I hate to tell you this, but we're reducing the wages and benefits on this project by 15, 20% in some cases. It was absolutely horrifying. That labor force had no representation, nowhere to go. I was the one, as the president of the building trades, that challenged that. And 2 years later, after the job was complete, the Federal Department of Labor overturned it. That's all it is. The fact that non-union contractors cannot bid on project labor agreements on publicly funded projects is not true. It's absolutely not true. You can bid on, you can't, public procurement cannot exclude any bidders. They do not want to, because the entity that they will have to deal with are the labor unions in the jurisdiction of the state. The labor unions that are going to make sure that the workers are from that locality. The workers that are working there. All right, so there was no, there's been no federal project labor agreements. There's been no state, God forbid, state project labor agreements. And this law would exclude the state from having that as a tool to say, okay, we want to institute on this project because there's no workforce in this area, like up in Coos County, for instance, that are currently working in construction. We want to act and put in what we want to put in to this project labor agreement. It doesn't have to be wages, doesn't have to be anything. It could be just local workers. Community benefit agreements. What if a municipality wanted to instill one because they wanted to attract workers from their school? It doesn't even have to be with the building trades. It could be with a non-union contractor. Project labor agreements are literally just including labor, and it's a tool. This is a tool that you want to make illegal, right across the line. And I just don't, I seriously don't understand, you know, the theory behind it, especially when the number one reason we are losing workers is because the wages and benefits are so different over the border. In 2000, there was 12 103 members, which is a Boston local, that resided in the state of New Hampshire. I was a business manager of Local 490 with all the New Hampshire IBW guys. They had 12 members. Today, they have 637 of our residents that live in New Hampshire and exclusively work in Massachusetts with their skills. And there's some really, really good electricians. A lot of them left us to go there because the differences were just astronomical in wages and benefits and everything else to cross the border, which they used to drive into work anyway. That's the nature of the business. Our construction industry, as far as the workers go, is on the bridge of collapse. It's on the bridge of collapse. That's why 10 years ago, this place would have been full of union representation. All of our representation now is from Massachusetts because we don't have the guys to support it, so they have to support our local unions, except for the electricians and the pipe fitter. So this is what we're up against. And I'll tell you, it's pretty disheartening. You know, you want to add another issue as to why a worker would want to leave the state of New Hampshire. You want to compare projects, you want to compare jobs as to our procurement policy that we have right now, which is lowest responsible bid, right, to a job with a project labor agreement on it. And if you're a worker working in the field and you know that your wages cannot be reduced on a job, or the everyday business procurement policy that we have, what are you going to choose? Right now, we might want to take a look at what the workers are choosing. And they're not going to choose this, I can tell you that. Thank you for your comment. I mean, thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I think we heard that PLAs are not really being used here, so I'm curious if there's national experience or experience from other states that would give us information on whether PLA versus non-PLA projects are the same size. Is there a difference in whether they're completed on time, if they are completed under budget or at budget? What do we know from other states?
Well, now, certainly publicly funded PLAs have not been used in New Hampshire. New Hampshire Building Trades has worked on numerous projects by private industry that have decided to use a project labor agreement. For instance, the scrubber project at the Bow Power Plant was under a project labor agreement. The Burgess biomass plant was under a project labor agreement. There's been numerous projects throughout the years, not too many lately, but that have used a project labor agreement. And I can tell you, I was business manager on both when both of those were going on, In both of them, the scrubber project was $20 million under budget. The biomass project was also under budget. I can't remember what it was, but was also under budget. But we also kept the numbers as to, at the time, you know, they shut down the Berlin mills, right? So one of the big reasons with the project labor agreement, we worked with the city of Berlin, Mayor Grenier, was to make sure that we were putting those workers that were affected by the layoffs to work on that biomass plant. And that was a big reason why they entered into a project labor agreement, and Kate Street Capital, who owned the project at the time, decided to do so. And every electrician that worked on that plant that wanted to work on that project did. We took in apprentices from that area, which we still have today. And, you know, we fulfilled our obligations for the local workforce to try to make sure that everybody was working on that project. And the majority of the workers on that project, some 80%, were New Hampshire residents. And the same with the scrubber project. And that's what we do. You know, you talk about the difference in, you know, classifications and, you know, the impeding. Project labor agreements are only used on, you know, major complicated projects that are going to take a lot of people and a lot of manpower, and it takes a plan sometimes to get those people to go to work on that. Take for instance the balsams. If they wanted to expand the balsams, well, that workforce does not exist up there right now, right? And if they wanted to enter in with labor on how are we going to get and attract workers up here, versus just going up and having a couple of job fairs and seeing who comes out or whatnot, right? They could work with the building trades. The building trades come up with, you know, funding for, you know, workforce housing for the project and all kinds of things to make the job, you know, worthwhile, and make sure that they get the skilled workers that they get there, and also work with the community in training a new workforce for that area so that they can get the skills needed for construction. And one of the things on a project labor agreement that's never going to be taken away is the fact that an employer must contribute to a training fund, right? We don't have that in New Hampshire on anything, any kind of procurement. And the industry has decided that somebody else should be training their workforce, like the state of New Hampshire and the federal government, through training funds. We in the building trades believe that if you're in a business, if you're an electrical contractor, you should have some stake in the training of your workforce. And on a project labor agreement, you can be guaranteed that there's going to be a contribution that going into training for the workers that are working on that job. Those are the types of things that you can institute or not, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to have that one in there. And you can craft a project labor agreement to say anything you want, or a community workforce agreement. If the city of Manchester, for instance, was building something and they wanted to incorporate 80% of their residents on a project, and that would be the requirement of the job, then, you know, that would be a good thing for the city of Manchester. You know, when we have these projects, you don't know where people are coming from. I did some numbers. Since 2015, 4,019 projects were bid in the state of New Hampshire. 3,071 of those were bid, but there were actually New Hampshire contractors bidding those projects. We were the only state of the 6 states that didn't have as many contractors bidding our own projects as we had projects. In contrast, there were 13,569 projects bid in Massachusetts, 21,443 Mass resident contractors bid on those projects. You know, it's just, you know, this is prior to the recession, back in, you know, the day, these numbers were unheard of. We're headed for a crash. We're in a crash. We have 600 and something open job calls in the state of New Hampshire for construction, skilled workers. We have to find ways. We have to really start working on ways, and I'm not sure what the answer is, to try to get people involved and entice the worker, right? So the worker needs some enticement now. It's not all about the employer. You know, if the AVC or whoever were really supporting their employees that they claim, then those workers on the Job Corps Center would have been represented by them, not me. I was the one that put the complaint in, and hopefully they got reimbursed for the money that they lost.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee?
Sorry, that was too.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. My question involves a statement that you made about training for workers. We're seeing a proliferation of state and federal funding where the state and taxpayers are picking up the burden of training for professions. Can you speak to what the IBEW, for example, does in that regard?
Absolutely. So, just for the record, the IBEW has not used any state or federal funds for our training. I can't speak for the local union now because I don't run it anymore. But they may apply for grants. I have no idea. But when we bargain with our employers, we come up with a figure as to how we can maintain our training program that we have, right? So we have a training program up on 48 Airport Road here in Concord for all the electricians that come through our program in the state of New Hampshire. Depending on the amount of apprentices and the cost that it's going to take to train them, right? When I went through the apprenticeship program back in the 80s, it was completely free of charge. Today, obviously, we can't do that anymore. So our apprentices have to contribute a percentage on their own behalf because of the education that they're getting. Our employers contribute $1 an hour for every hour worked by every member on every project in the state of New Hampshire towards training. So if we work 500,000 hours in a calendar year, that $500,000 is geared right towards training, and that's what we use to buy the equipment, pay the instructors, and pay the majority of the training expenses that we have, and along with our curriculum. That's how we fund it. It's in our collective bargaining agreement. So they have to pay for every dollar, and that's a concession from the workers, right? This wasn't just easily given by our employers because they're trying to compete here in New Hampshire, right? So instead of taking raises or an extra 25 cents an hour back in 1960 when we started our program, our members decided we wanted that in our training program, right? And it's been up to as much as $1.25 back in 2002, but we've needed to take from it to fund our healthcare funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Casey.
Thank you.
Have Marco Lacasse, IBEW 490, signed in opposed to the bill but not speaking. Chair recognizes.
I was hoping to speak.
I'm sorry?
I did want to speak.
You did want to speak, okay,
Yes.
you didn't mark that down.
Okay.
Okay, Chair recognizes Marco Lacasse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senators, for having me today. For the record, my name is Marco Lacasse. I am the current business manager of Local 490 here in Concord, New Hampshire. Do you know what you're getting when you do a project labor agreement? Having the best available workforce, the most reputable contractors on any project will aid in its success. Guaranteeing that contractors and labor meet the standard becomes an issue. This is why the construction industry has seen a growing use of responsible contracting language, project labor agreements, and CWAs on both public, large-scale projects. and private projects. By law, the public bodies are required to use the lowest responsible contractor. As you said, due diligence, right? You're trustees of the funds. In theory, protecting the public's interest. Too often, the word responsible is not adequately defined or enforced. This allows for contractors with inadequate qualifications and poor performance standards to gain awards of public construction jobs. Responsible contractors reform can be implemented through either legislative action, ordinances, resolutions, executive orders, policy directives, binding specifications. The following examples of qualifying standards. Number one, all businesses, trade professionals, licenses, registrations, certificates required by law. All bonding and insurance required by applicable law or contract specs. Any acceptable past performance records showing it has not been debarred or defaulted by any government agency and has not had its license revoked in the past 3 years. A clean record on law compliance, no major violations of any law relating to the construction industry of $1,000 or more. An established grievance, arbitration system for craft employees to resolve potential labor disputes arising in connection with performance of contract at work, which would have been helpful there at Job Corps. A certified apprenticeship training program for crafts, which, as Joe stated, we are self-funded. We, this past fall, took in our biggest class of first-year apprentices, and I was part of that as a trustee of looking and interviewing apprentices. And the dynamics of the new people coming in isn't just 18-year-olds. It's 32-year-olds that are looking to have a change in their industry because they're working in the food industry and they saw no ends to get out of it. They want a retirement. They want to be able to see them get out of it at the end, what they put in. Our apprenticeship system is, if you've never been to our training center here at 48 Airport Road, I would recommend you come take a look at it. All other technical qualifications, equipment, financial resources, personnel to successful performing of the project. And that's for responsible contractors. Project labor agreements and CWAs is a pre-hire collective bargaining agreement. Terms and agreements apply to all contractors and subcontractors who successfully bid on the project. In existing collective bargaining agreements, PLAs are used on both public and private projects. Their specific provisions may be tailored by the signatory parties to meet the needs of the particular project. Just like the responsible contractor, PLAs can be added as legislative and executive actions. Benefits of using a PLA or CWA. Providing uniform wages and benefits, overtime pay, hours, working conditions, and working rules. Provide contractors with a reliable, uninterrupted supply of qualified workers at a predictable cost. Ensure that projects will be completed on time and on budget. Ensure no labor strife by prohibiting strikes, lockouts, and including binding procedures to resolve labor disputes. Make large projects easier to manage by placing unions under one contract, the PLA. May include provisions for recruitment and training programs for women, minorities, and veterans. Reduce misclassification of workers and the related underpayment of payroll taxes, workers' compensation, and other requirements. Larger percentage of construction wages stay in the state. Improve worker safety by requiring contractors and workers to comply with project safety rules. Now, there is something to be said. We represent the workers, and they have a way to come to us to resolve any disputes. So we as a union represent the workers. What is ABC? ABC also pays dues. They pay dues to be a union to ABC, but that's just the contractors. That doesn't represent the workers at all. The workers have no say. They can't go to ABC and say, I don't like this and I don't like that, because ABC only represents a union for contractors. So ABC, to be a member of ABC, you're paying dues. And I keep hearing, union members have to pay dues. Yeah, you're paying in for something you believe in. So the union contractors are paying dues too. But what's their agenda? Their agenda is for right to work every year coming across the state. And the fact is that, the competitive advantage they have sometimes is they don't pay the employee. I worked non-union for 16 years. 16 years before I smartened up. And when I joined the union, back in '98, my healthcare costs that was then picked up by the union, no cost to me, was $600 a month, a month, excuse me. Today, that's a car payment. So that competitive advantage they have of not having to pay a full cost of healthcare, yeah, that's an advantage that they have. But we're representing our members by giving them good retirement benefits. We have members that can live on their retirement and live with dignity and respect. And that's what the union is all about, to be able to retire with respect and dignity. Any questions?
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Guida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you are IBEW New Hampshire.
Business manager for 490, that's correct, here in Concord.
Okay, so can you state how many PLAs might be in force in New Hampshire at this time?
At this time, we have no PLAs in force right now.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Cass. Chair recognizes Tommy Bolduc and Optaline Enterprise.
Yes.
Speaking in favor of the bill.
Thank you for having me today. Like I said, my name's Tommy Bolduc. I'm one of the owners of Optaline Enterprises. We're a commercial and high-volume residential drywall and metal framing company. We employ over 200 employees, and we are proud of the work that we do. We're proud of our culture that we have built, that we every year bring in new faces to our business. Since 2006, Optaline has been committed to completing projects on time and within budget, while providing customers with the highest quality of work throughout the southern New Hampshire. I am voicing my support for the SB 274 today because I believe it is the kind of common sense approach that we need to protect the accountability and oversight in our construction work. Project labor agreements, when mandated by the government, discourage companies like mine from bidding on the job. Without the legislation, it is easy for a disassociated government administration to add on a project labor agreement on a bid. A government-mandated PLA overrides a contractor's rights to privately negotiated terms and conditions he has with the employees, be that open shop or union. I can decide the best way to negotiate with my labor force to offer taxpayers the best quality work for the best possible price. A government-mandated PLA takes that right away from me. That leads to inefficiencies and drives up costs. These mandates not only reduce freedom, but it hits New Hampshire taxpayers in their wallet. Material pricing is already making construction more expensive, as we all know. With all this DC money coming to us, we don't need projects to become more expensive. SB 274 protects state taxpayers from Washington insiders trying to put PLAs on projects. Importantly, SB 274 doesn't prohibit project labor agreements. It simply leaves the decision to use a project labor agreement up to the contractor. And one thing I'd like to add and mention is that we've hired probably in the past several months 10 to 12 employees a week. We've created a culture that's ours. Like my father says, there's not enough. It's not that there's not enough workers out there. There's not enough good teachers. So we at Optaline have developed a train-the-trainer program where we train our own employees. We have a facility at our warehouse that we train in our warehouse, and then we bring them to the field and train them there. As a business leader and taxpayer, I ask that you pass this bill.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Charlie Hall from Denman Hall. speaking in favor of the bill?
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Hall, fifth generation resident of Nashua, third generation owner of a business, J. Lawrence Hall Company in Nashua. I was owner and president till November 1st, and then November 1st we merged into Denron Plumbing and HVAC up in Manchester. We are now known as Denron Hall, and I've been demoted to vice president. On my way to retirement, which after listening to some of these people, boy, am I glad I'm doing that. But, we're proud members of ABC. We use them for training a lot between the New Hampshire and Massachusetts chapter of ABC. To compare the New Hampshire worker to the Massachusetts workers is a challenge. We all drive into Boston at times and see all those buildings going up. And obviously that's where that's why construction numbers are up high in Massachusetts. We pay our employees extremely competitively. I'm trying to think back on, and I'm mainly talking from my J. Lawrence Hall Company days and then the Denron Hall. I would say the last time we lost an employee to the union has been at least 20 or 30 years ago. I don't recall the last time, to be frank with you, before that. We offer great benefits. One of the things that we like about being merit shop based is we can cross-train our employees. We have sheet metal, or we do sheet metal, we do plumbing, we do pipe fitting, we do service, we do controls, all those things. And quite often for that young person getting into the trades, or even as a previous speaker mentioned, that 30-year-old that's getting out of the restaurant business or whatever, is we kind of say, hey, let's get you into sheet metal, train you into sheet metal. It's kind of the gateway to the HVAC industry, and you can see all the things that are going on around you. So it's the training is extremely important. The flexibility that we allow our employees is extremely important to us. The mention was of finding employees. And I've had a number of conversations with different people that truthfully, what is going on with, at least in our industry, of finding employees, it's nothing new. I mean, we've been struggling for 20 or 30 years. And to me, the frustrating part is that there's people that should be out there working, and I want to hire those people. And we can hire them at a good wage, and in a good trade, in a good industry. I think now, federally, people are starting to talk of community colleges and not just universities. And, again, J. Lawrence Hall Company had 80 employees. Now we're a company with Denron Hall, we're a company of 220. And J. Lawrence Hall Company, we probably had 7 employees with a college degree. Everybody else was community college or on-the-job training. So I think this is a great bill to support. I don't think by passing this bill, I don't think all of a sudden I'm going to lose all my employees to Massachusetts. I think if anything, it just kind of hits home to us as a business owner that we can competitively bid everything. We can try and keep our costs down to the state, to where they should be. And thank you, and I appreciate your support for this bill.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. Can you quantify any wage disparity between your shop, for example, and a PLA or a union shop?
I think, yes. I think, and I was thinking about that on the way up. And one of the things, there's different level, plumbers get X, sheet metal get X. And for us, what we do quite often or I shouldn't say what we do quite a bit, what we do. Basically, our teams are teams of 2. Now, we could have 8 people on a project, but they're teams of 2. And, you know, our average pay rate is probably $35 an hour. And so, you know, quite often we'll team a $40 journeyman with a $20 apprentice. So the cost I'm carrying is $30 an hour. Now, if I was to be under constraints of the PLA or of prevailing wage portion of that, I'd be probably at least carrying $35 to $40 an hour, even for the apprentice. I'm fine with that on the journeyman, but the apprentice who's just getting into the trade, I have a problem paying him $35 an hour, to be frank with you. He likes it, but
Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Drew Klein from Josiah Bartlett Center, speaking in favor of the bill.
Good afternoon. I'll try to be brief. I'm Drew Klein from the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. We are no relation to the gentleman from Methuen Construction, as far as I know. The Josiah Bartlett Center, as you guys know, is a free market think tank. We are sometimes mistakenly called pro-business. We are pro-markets. We are pro-competition. And this bill is music to our ears. This is not an anti-union bill. This bill does not prohibit, PLAs. It just says when the state puts out a bid for these contracts, it can neither require nor prohibit project labor agreements. I think that's beautiful. That ensures an even playing field, right? It ensures real competitive market. So, unionized companies contractors can compete, non-unionized can compete, and the state can make decisions, based on what its interests are in that contract. But it also, and this is important to recognize, it does not prohibit PLAs in the contract. You can have a project labor agreement in the contract. You just can't, the state cannot require it as a condition of the contract. That's the difference. It's not anti-PLA, it's not anti-union. It just ensures a level playing field at the top when the state is putting the contract out to bid, that's all. So we view that as a good, nice, level playing field measure for the state. Just to talk about some of the costs real quickly, so there are studies on both sides of this issue. Suffolk University down in Boston has done some fabulous studies, the Beacon Institute down there, finding PLAs substantially increase costs for school construction projects, for example. They did a couple of studies in Connecticut over a series of years, finding that in one study it was 18% increase, in another study it was a 19% increase. There have been other studies that suggest that it's not quite so large and maybe it's a wash. So to me, that's not really the main incentive here, or the main reason for this bill to lower costs. It's not really about costs, it's about leveling the playing field. And I think that's a good thing for the state. So that's all.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much. I have no other ones signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on Senate Bill 274? Okay, signed in favor of the bill, we have Greg Moore from Americans for Prosperity and Curtis Howland. Signed in opposition to the bill, Mike Edgar, Margaret Burns from New Hampshire Municipal Association, Glenn Brackett from the New Hampshire AFL-CIO, David probably butchered this last name, Speculi, Larry Moquin, Alan Raff, Senator Kevin Kavanaugh, Philip Leary, Roger Goulet, Richard Rothwell, and David Pelletier. With that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 274. And while we're waiting, getting ready for the next one, I will go back to say that on Senate Bill 371, we had 18 people signing in support, and they are Senator Kevin Avard, Senator Aaron Hennessy, Scott Burns, Harry Pollock, Tom Irwin, Brian Sullivan, Derek Furland, Catherine Kirkwood, Dana McGrath, Dale McGrath, Charlene Lovett, Catherine LaJoy, John LaJoy, Alyssa Margolin, Alice Eli, Jennifer Smith, Jonathan Nelson, Elizabeth Fenner Lucatis, and Margaret Bowles. And on Senate Bill 272, the following individuals were signed in support. Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka, Senator Kevin Kavanaugh, and Senator Susie. All set? Okay, we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 278 relative to funding for the Piscataqua River Turning Basin and the Port Authority project, and recognize the, let's see, 278. Okay, and I have the prime sponsor, Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka.
I am not Senator Perkins Quokka,
I
for the record.
I understand that, and I would, she was signed in favor of
Right.
speaking.
Right. She stayed, she had to leave for other
Okay.
obligations.
So I will recognize Senator Sherman as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, my name is Senator Tom Sherman, District 24. I am a co-sponsor of this legislation, and Senator Perkins Quokka asked me to introduce into the record her statement of introduction of the bill. She says, "Good afternoon. For the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka from District 21, representing the city of Portsmouth and the towns of Madbury, Lee, Durham, Newington, Newmarket, and Newfields. I am prime sponsor of Senate Bill 278 FN, an act relative to funding for the Piscataqua River Turning Basin project in the Port Authority project. Senate Bill 278 is a request from Gino Marconi, Port Director of the New Hampshire Port Authority. In the 2019 budget package, a sum of money was assigned to the Port Authority project in Rye Harbor. Those funds were refunded by the contractor, and Senate Bill 278 will allow those funds to be made available to the Piscataqua River Turning Basin widening project. The Piscataqua River Turning Basin has been an issue for years, with the size of the turning basin no longer being sufficient for modern vessels. Widening the turning basin with these additional funds will be a massive boon to the seacoast economically, making the area more efficient and much safer. In the 2021 budget package, $1,500,000 was appropriated to the turning basin project. SB 278 is taking the remaining $251,143 from the 2019 Rye Harbor project and adding to the total for the turning basin project. Although the language of the bill is not clear in this respect at first glance, this bill is not drawing from new funds, but instead reallocating funds from the 2019 budget cycle that were reabsorbed by the general fund because no non-lapsing language was used at the time. Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present SB 278FN, and she would have been happy to answer any questions. And for the record, I am here in support. Senator Waters and Senator Perkins Quokka and I accompanied Gino on a tour of the Turning Basin, and really to stay competitive with our neighboring ports in Massachusetts and Maine. This is a vital project. This Turning Basin allows those long ships that come in, which many of you probably have seen. They'll come all the way up the harbor, up the river. And there are several areas for docking and unloading in the Piscataqua, but they have to turn. They have to go back out. So this will allow the larger vessels that we currently can't accommodate in New Hampshire to actually have a port in New Hampshire where they can offload. With that, I'd be happy to try to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Sherman, for coming. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the project needs to be done now because the Coast Guard has it, some federal entity has it on its priority list. And if you lose your spot on the priority list,
correct,
you lose the ability to do this project. And it's a zero-sum game because the money is available. It was not spent in the project.
Right.
It was returned, the previous project, it was returned to the state. So there's really no cost. That money's still available. It doesn't have a negative effect on the budget. I think we should be made perfectly clear of that. But the most important ingredient is if we don't do it now, we lose our spot on the list of projects to be done. And as a result of that, we hurt the economy of the state because the turning mechanism is vital to the economic viability of the port. I think that's the essential ingredient of this situation. And without that, we hurt our state economically. And I've talked to Gino, and I know you people have talked to Gino Marconi about it. I think he does a great job of making sure that port runs well, runs efficiently and effectively, and does his utmost to make sure that the ships that come in can be handled and can be brought in and brought out without any danger being presented to the ships and to the people who are manning the ships. But indeed, the money's there. The position in terms of doing this project is assured. If you don't do it at this time, we'll lose it, and as a result of that, we'll be in trouble. I think that's true. Would you confirm that, please?
Absolutely, and you all will recall we ran into similar timing issues with the Hampton Seabrook Harbor dredging, Rye Harbor dredging, and in fact, the commercial pier in Portsmouth. That was a little bit of a surprise because that started to collapse, including the gas docks there. So the legislature I think we all understand the timing issues here, especially when it's a state-federal partnership. And so I would hope this would have your support. Without it, as Senator D'Alessandro says, without it now, we risk losing our place. And when you lose your place, you're losing your place for a long time. That's why we had to move so quickly with the other projects as well.
Thank you. Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You might infer when you say lose your place that there's a federal funding component that's also associated?
Yes, absolutely. And also a federal timing component.
Further questions? Senator Morse?
Yep. The $251,000 that we're reappropriating, was that a capital budget project that didn't spend all the money?
I believe it was.
I'd just like to point out, I would have sent this to capital budget if I had recognized that. The reallocation of funds like that, that committee should weigh in on. So we'll figure it out. But
further questions? Senator Hennessy?
Thank you. I'm not on capital budget, but for those of you who are, can you tell me why this wasn't addressed in the capital budget that we just passed?
Senator D'Alessandro?
I don't think the situation was available at that time, the knowledge of the situation. The fact that the initial appropriation was over in terms of its coverage of the project that was attempted. So it was done for less money, and as a result, they turned the money back. And that happened later in the game, I believe, after the capital budget was put together. It's a timing, I believe it's a timing situation.
Thank you.
And if I may, I'd be happy to check with Gino and get back to you with an answer. But I believe Senator D'Alessandro is correct on the timing issues.
And my understanding on this is that this was left over from the previous project. Because that project was closed, there was no way to be able to transfer the money over to this, and that this was really the only way. So that goes back into the general fund and then to be put to the project, so it is a net zero. And then that's my understanding, was that this was the only way to be able to successfully transfer that money over. Senator Morse, did you have something?
Yeah, I really do think, just for the purpose, Gino's worked with us on a bunch of things, and one of the last things he came in for, he said there was gonna be a shortfall, and I'm willing to bet this was it. But on the capital budget side, if this was a capital budget item and there was a shortfall, it wouldn't go to the general fund. It would have been a bonding shortfall that the capital budget committee often goes through and scores all that 2 years later and says, we got $10 million here from stuff that we didn't spend money on, and let's reallocate it. Bob Clegg idea. It started a long time ago when I learned how to do it, and I just think we should find that out from the capital budget committee. I don't think this is touching the general fund, and as we exec, I would like to talk about that general fund, because there's a lot of appropriations going on, and I can tell you there's some big ideas coming over from the House that'll eat up that number in 1 minute. So I think we have to be careful.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have no more speakers signed up. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on Senate Bill 278? Senator Waters did sign in favor.
Here's a guy that could answer our question. Right there. And not that we want to be capital budget, but I mean.
Good afternoon. For the record, Chris Shea, Deputy Legislative Budget Assistant. To explain the issue with the bill that was just before you, or that is before you, there was a dredge project for Rye that completed in the capital budget for 2017. There was no lapse extension asked for in the current capital budget, so that ended at fiscal year 21. The money is a state match that goes to the Army Corps of Engineers. Once the project was completed, the Army Corps of Engineers came back to the Port Authority and said, we recalculated what was needed from the state, and we actually overbilled you $251,000. So that went back to the Port Authority. Mr. Marconi approached the Capital Budget Overview Committee to see if there was a way to move that money to the Turning Basin project, and there was not, because the capital budget project that was associated with that money has been closed. So it was suggested to him that he come through with an LSR or a bill to appropriate the money directly for that Turning Basin project. So that's why the bill has come before you. Supposedly, and I can't speak to this just yet, but he was directed to deposit the money back with the state. I don't know if they've done that step yet, but I believe that that check has been deposited into the general fund.
Senator Morse?
So if we're looking at this now, is this a general fund expenditure, not a transfer from?
Yes, because essentially they would have deposited the $251,000 into the general fund, and they're just asking for that to be reappropriated to this project.
Yeah, that's the first on my end, but so that'd be calculated in the lapse that we just.
Yes. Well, it depends on when that deposit was made, so it wouldn't necessarily show up in the 2021 CAFR as of yet, because I don't know if the Port Authority has provided it, the timing associated when they provided it back to the state. So it may show up in the 2022 lapse amount, potentially.
All right. Further questions? There being none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 278. And the committee will be in recess for 1/2 hour. Yeah, there'll be some that we will be able to accept.
So where's Mr. Marconi? Capital budget would be a week or something. Sure, it's not gonna do it. Well, no, because he gave it back.
because this bill actually prohibiting as well as prohibits requiring. But there's some language later on in the bill that might require a little bit of work. Page 2, lines 24 to 26 or 5%.
Municipal Association made light of that.
So I still move the bill.
Yeah, and I think we could probably bring in an amendment to that if it's desired. Further discussion? There being none, all those in favor of the ought to pass motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. And motion carries 5-2. And Senator Reagan?
Yeah, sure. You're the chair.
I suppose consent is not a question.
Yeah, I think it is. And Senate Bill 278, there will be an amendment that is going to be drafted up by LBA, and so we will not take that up today. With that, I'll take a motion to come out of non-public or out of executive session. Moved by Senator D'Alessandro, second by Senator Gaida. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries, and we are out of executive session. Having no more business today, we will adjourn. Thank you.